My brother sold me out while I was 2 months pregnant. What my mafia husband did to him. They never found the body. The test showed 2 pink lines. 2 months pregnant with a mafia boss's child. And the only person I told was my brother, the one person I thought I could trust with my life. 3 days later, armed men stormed our safe house in the middle of the night. My brother had given them our location. He traded my life and my baby's life for money. When my husband found out who betrayed us, his eyes went completely black. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just kissed my forehead, whispered that everything would be handled, and walked out the door. My brother started calling me the next morning, begging, screaming that he made a mistake. By noon, his phone went dead. By midnight, my husband came home with blood on his cufflinks and told me I'd never have to worry about my brother again. I never asked what happened. I didn't need to. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, they deserve erasure. Hit that like and subscribe button right now. Tell me this, would you survive one night in this world? Or would you run? Comment stay or escape. I stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. My hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it into the sink. 2 months. I was 2 months pregnant with Somario Vexelio Durant's baby, and I hadn't told a single soul. Not his men, not his sister. Nobody. The secret sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and terrifying, because bringing a child into this world, into his world, meant painting a target on something even more precious than my own life. But that night, sitting across from my brother Callum at a small Italian restaurant in Chicago's Little Italy, the words just slipped out. Maybe it was the wine he ordered that I couldn't drink. Maybe it was the way he asked if I was okay, if Somario was treating me right. Maybe I just needed someone from my old life to know that despite everything, despite the violence and the danger, something beautiful was growing inside me. I'm pregnant, I whispered, leaning across the red checkered tablecloth. Callum's fork froze halfway to his mouth. His eyes went wide, then narrow, then strange. Pregnant? Does he know? Not yet. You're the first person I've told. Something flickered across his face, something I couldn't read. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's amazing, Hesper. Really? How far along? 2 months. Then came the questions. Too many questions. Where was I staying now? When did Somario travel? How many guards did I have? What was my security routine? I answered automatically, distracted by nausea and exhaustion, dismissing the warning bells ringing faintly in the back of my mind. This was Callum, my brother, the person who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me down the aisle at my first wedding, who cried when our mother died. He wouldn't hurt me, but when I got home that night, Somario took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. He cornered me in our bedroom, his dark eyes searching mine with that intensity that made me feel stripped bare. What happened tonight? I tried to deflect, but he stepped closer, his hand gentle on my jaw, tilting my face up to his. Hesper, talk to me, I told Callum, I whispered. About the baby. For a moment, pure joy lit up his face, the kind of unguarded happiness I rarely saw from a man who controlled half of Chicago's underworld. He pulled me into his arms, his hand sliding down to rest protectively over my still flat stomach. You're pregnant? I nodded against his chest, breathing in his scent, expensive cologne and danger. But then his body went rigid. You told your brother first? I needed to tell someone. He's family. Somario pulled back, his expression shifting into something unreadable. What did he ask you? Nothing. Just normal questions. He was happy for us. What questions? Hesper? His voice dropped lower, colder. I rattled them off, still not understanding. But Somario's jaw tightened with each one. When I finished, he kissed my forehead, a gesture so tender it made my chest ache, and then stepped away to make a phone call. I couldn't hear what he said, but I caught fragments. Double the security. I don't care what it costs. Lock down every entrance. No one gets in or out without my approval. When he hung up, he came back to bed and pulled me against him, his hand never leaving my stomach. I fell asleep, feeling safe, protected, loved. I had no idea that 3 days later, my brother's betrayal would nearly kill us both. That the questions he asked were a roadmap for assassins. That telling him about my pregnancy was the biggest mistake of my life. The explosion came at exactly 2:47 a.m. I know because I was staring at the clock when the windows blew inward, glass shredding through our bedroom like 1,000 knives. Somario's body slammed over mine before I could even scream, his weight crushing me into the mattress as the world erupted into chaos and fire. Stay down. His voice cut through the ringing in my ears. He rolled off me, already reaching for the gun he kept in the nightstand, and that's when I heard them footsteps, dozens of them, Heavy boots pounding through our penthouse, voices shouting orders in the darkness. Someone had given them the security codes. Someone had told them exactly where we slept. Someone had mapped out every guard's position, every camera, every possible escape route. So Mario moved like violence incarnate. 3 men burst through our bedroom door, and he dropped them before they could aim precise headshots that painted the walls red. But there were more. Always more. The hallway outside was swarming with armed mercenaries, and I realized with sick clarity that this wasn't a simple hit. This was an execution. The panic room. Now. So Mario hauled me up by my arm, his hand iron tight as he dragged me toward the hidden entrance behind our closet. Bullets tore through the doorframe beside my head. I felt the heat of them, close enough to singe my hair. We were almost there when I felt a punch to my shoulder that spun me sideways. No pain at first, just impact and confusion. Then fire, burning, searing agony that made me scream. I looked down and saw blood soaking through my nightgown, spreading dark and fast. Hesper! So Mario's face went white. He caught me as my legs gave out, one arm banding around my waist while the other kept firing. Hold on, just hold on. But all I could think was the baby. I clutched my stomach with my good hand, terrified I'd find blood there too. The baby. I know. I've got you. I've got both of you. His voice cracked on those words, raw and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. He kicked open the panic room door and shoved me inside just as another wave of attackers rounded the corner. I collapsed against the reinforced steel wall, my vision blurring as Somario turned back to face them. I wanted to scream at him to come inside, to lock the door, to save himself. But he couldn't. Not while his men were dying out there. Not while someone had violated his home, his family, his wife. Through the narrowing darkness, I watched him fight with a brutality I'd only heard about in whispered stories. 5 men. He killed 5 men with his bare hands when his gun ran empty, each movement precise and lethal and utterly merciless. Then reinforcements arrived, his reinforcements. The sound of return fire, of orders being shouted in Italian, of bodies hitting the floor. Someone yelled that the building was secure. A medic appeared in the panic room doorway, pressing gauze to my shoulder, asking me questions I couldn't answer because the room was spinning and I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. The baby, I gasped. Please, check the baby. So Mario dropped to his knees beside me, his face streaked with blood, someone else's blood. His hands shook as they covered mine over my stomach. Tell me you're okay. Tell me he didn't. I don't know, I sobbed. I don't know. That's when his enforcer, Marco, appeared in the doorway. He leaned down and whispered something in Somario's ear. Something that made every drop of warmth drain from my husband's face. His eyes went completely black, empty, inhuman. He stood slowly, his movements mechanical. When he looked at me, I saw murder in his expression. I'll be right back. Somario, what? But he was already gone, disappearing into the blood-soaked hallway while I lay there bleeding. Our baby's fate uncertain, and the terrible knowledge settling over me like ice. Someone close to us had done this. Someone we trusted. Someone who knew exactly how to destroy us. I woke up in a room I didn't recognize. White walls, sterile smell, machines beeping steadily beside me. For a moment, I couldn't remember why my shoulder burned like someone had driven a hot poker through it, or why my hand was pressed protectively over my stomach. Then it all came flooding back, the explosion, the bullets, the blood. The baby? I croaked, my throat raw from screaming. Somario materialized beside the bed like he'd been waiting for those exact words. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw dark with stubble, his shirt still stained with dried blood. But his hand was gentle when it covered mine. Safe. The baby's safe. The bullet missed everything vital. You're both going to be okay. I started crying then, relief crashing over me so violently I couldn't breathe. He climbed into the narrow hospital bed and held me while I shook, whispering promises in Italian I didn't understand but felt in my bones. That's when my phone rang. We both froze. Somario reached across me and picked it up from the side table, his expression darkening when he saw the caller ID. It's your brother. My blood turned to ice. Don't answer it. Oh, we're answering it. He hit speaker and handed me the phone. Hesper? Oh God, Hesper, are you okay? Callum's voice was frantic, breathless, terrified. I heard what happened. I heard about the attack. Please tell me you're alive. I'm alive, I said slowly, watching Somario's face. Barely. Thank God. Listen, I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. The people I owe money to, they're coming for me. I need to disappear. I need $50,000, Hesper. Please. You have to help me. Something about his tone felt wrong. Rehearsed. Desperate but not surprised. What people, Callum? It doesn't matter. Just can you get me the money? Can Samario? How did you know about the attack? I interrupted, my voice sharp. Silence. Then, it's all over the news. Everyone knows. It happened at 2:47 a.m. It's barely dawn. There's been no news coverage. My heart hammered against my ribs. How did you know, Callum? His breathing changed. Faster. Panicked. Someone called me. One of Samario's people. Nobody called you, Samario said quietly, his voice like a blade. I gave explicit orders. No outside communication. More silence. Then Callum started talking too fast, words tumbling over each other. Okay, look, I heard things. People talk. The men who hired me, the men who threatened me, they mentioned it was going down tonight. The men who hired you. I repeated, my voice hollow. You just said hired. No, I said, threatened. You misheard. Hesper, please, I'm your brother. You have to believe me. But then he made his fatal mistake. Look, I know they sent 12 guys. I know it went down at exactly 2:47. I know you got hit in the shoulder. I didn't want that to happen. I told them not to hurt you. I swear. I just needed the money. I didn't think they'd actually... He stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. How did you know I got shot in the shoulder? How did you know there were 12 men? How did you know the exact time? No answer. Just ragged breathing on the other end. You sold me out. The words came out broken, disbelieving. You sold out your pregnant sister for money. It wasn't supposed to go like this. They promised they'd just scare him, make him back off some territory. They weren't supposed to hurt you. When I found out you were there, I tried to call it off. But what? I screamed. But you'd already taken their money? Already given them our security codes? Already told them exactly where we'd be sleeping? Samario plucked the phone from my trembling hands. His face had gone completely blank, the expression that terrified even his enemies. He hit record on his own phone before speaking. Callum, this is Samario. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and you're going to answer honestly. Understand? Samario, please, I can explain. How much did they pay you? A pause, then whispered, 50,000. How many times have you sold us out? Longer pause. 4 times. Did you know she was pregnant when you gave them our location? The longest pause of all. I watched Samario's jaw tighten, watched his knuckles go white around the phone. When Callum finally answered, his voice was barely audible. Yes, Samario ended the call. He played the recording back 3 times, his expression never changing. Then he stood, leaned down, and kissed my forehead with devastating gentleness, a goodbye kiss, though I didn't understand that yet. I'm going to handle this, he said softly. You and the baby will be safe. That's all that matters. Don't kill him, I begged, even though part of me already knew it was too late. Please, Samario. He's my brother. He looked at me with something like pity. He stopped being your brother the moment he traded your life for gambling debts. He's just a threat now, and I eliminate threats. Then he walked out, leaving me alone with the recording of my brother's confession playing on loop in my head. Would you forgive a betrayal like this, or would you want justice? Comment forgive or justice below. Samario's network activated like a living organism. Every informant, every corrupt cop, every street-level operator he owned suddenly had one mission: find Callum Rowe. I wasn't supposed to know about it. He'd left me in that sterile safe house with guards outside my door, and strict orders that I rest, that I focus on healing, that I let him handle everything. But I heard the phone calls through the walls, heard him speaking rapid Italian, his voice cold and clipped and absolutely lethal, heard names of neighborhoods, descriptions of vehicles, promises of payment for information. My brother had maybe 6 hours before Samario's web closed around him completely. Part of me wanted to warn Callum, wanted to call him back and tell him to run, to disappear, to get as far from Chicago as humanly possible. But every time I reached for my phone, I felt the bandage on my shoulder, remembered the terror of thinking I'd lost my baby, remembered my own brother's voice admitting he knew I was pregnant when he sold our location. Some betrayals are too big to forgive. Marco appeared in my doorway around noon, his expression grim. We found him. Samario looked up from the laptop where he'd been coordinating the search, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Where? Motel 6 on South Halsted, room 118. He's alone. Been there since last night. How long to get there? 20 minutes. Samario stood, already reaching for his jacket. That's when I spoke up, my voice stronger than I felt. What are you going to do to him? He turned slowly, and I saw the truth written all over his face. This wasn't going to be a conversation. This wasn't going to be a warning. This was going to be final. Don't ask me questions you don't want answered, he said softly. He's my brother. He tried to have you killed, while you were carrying my child. His voice dropped to something dangerous. Do you understand what that means? What I have to do now? I understand you're about to murder my only family. No. He crossed the room and knelt beside my chair, his hands framing my face with infinite gentleness. I'm about to protect my family. There's a difference. Tears burned down my cheeks. I hate him. I hate what he did. But if you kill him, I don't know if I can. Look at me. He waited until my eyes met his. He didn't just betray us once. 4 times, Hesper. 4 times he sold information about you, about our security, about where we'd be vulnerable. The pregnancy was just his biggest payday. If I let him live, he'll do it again. Or someone else will use him to get to us. I can't take that risk. Not with you. Not with our baby. I wanted to argue. Wanted to find some other solution that didn't end with my brother's blood on my husband's hands. But deep down, in the part of me that had survived witness protection and fallen in love with a mafia boss, I knew he was right. Don't tell me the details, I whispered. When it's done, just don't tell me how. Something like relief crossed his face. He kissed me, then soft and lingering and full of promises he'd kill to keep. Get some rest. I'll be back soon. But he didn't leave immediately. He sat with me for another hour, holding my hand while I cried. He called in a doctor to check on the baby again. Stood beside me while we heard the heartbeat. His expression transforming into something odd and broken when the steady thump 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 filled the room. That's our baby, I whispered. That's everything, he corrected. You're everything. When I finally fell asleep from exhaustion and pain medication, he kissed my forehead one last time and walked out the door. I didn't see Marco hand him the gun, but I felt the weight of what was about to happen settling over everything like a shroud. 6 hours later, Somario's men found Callum in that motel room, surrounded by empty bottles and crumpled racing forms, gambling debts scattered across the bed like evidence of his own destruction. They took him quietly, efficiently, no witnesses, no security footage. The kind of disappearance that happens every day in cities like Chicago. By the time they reached the warehouse on the industrial edge of the city, the one Somario owned through 3 shell companies, the one with soundproof walls and drains in the floor, Callum had already started begging. But Somario was already past hearing him, already past mercy, already focused on the only thing that mattered, making sure no one ever threatened his family again. The warehouse smelled like rust and old blood. Callum was tied to a metal chair in the center of the empty space, his nose already bleeding from where Marco had hit him during transport. His hands shook against the rope bindings, his eyes darting frantically between the armed men positioned along the walls like sentries. When Somario walked in, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Please, Callum started immediately, his voice breaking. Please, Somario, I can explain. They threatened me. They said they'd kill me if I didn't cooperate. I didn't have a choice. Somario said nothing. He pulled up a chair and sat down directly in front of Callum, so close their knees almost touched. He studied my brother with the same cold focus he'd give a chess opponent, calculating, analytical, utterly unmoved by the tears streaming down Callum's face. You had a choice, Somario said finally, his voice quiet, calm, terrifying in its restraint. You chose $50,000 over your sister's life. No, that's not. I never wanted her hurt. I told them she couldn't be there. I told them to wait until she was gone, but she was there, and you knew she would be, because you asked her where she was staying. When I traveled, how many guards protected her? Each word landed like a physical blow. You gave them a roadmap to killing her. I thought they just wanted to scare you, to send a message, with 12 armed mercenaries, at 3 a.m, through every entrance simultaneously. Somario leaned forward. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you didn't know exactly what you were selling. Callum's face crumpled. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I was desperate. The people I owe money to, they were going to kill me. I didn't know what else to do. You could have come to me. I would have paid your debts. And then what? Owe you? Be under your thumb forever? Callum's desperation turned briefly to anger. You don't help people, Somario. You own them. I own them because they betray me. Somario's voice never rose above conversational, which somehow made it worse. But family, real family I protect. Hesper's family should have been my family. You should have been safe. Instead, you became a threat. He pulled out his phone and played the recording from earlier. Callum's voice filled the warehouse, admitting to 4 separate betrayals, to taking payment, to knowing about the attack. When it reached the final question, did you know she was pregnant when you gave them our location? Somario paused the recording right before Callum's whispered yes. This is the part where you sealed your fate, Somario said softly. Everything before this, I might have forgiven. Might have broken your legs, taken your money, sent you away with a warning. But this? He pressed play. Yes. The word echoed through the warehouse. Callum started sobbing, his whole body shaking against the restraints. How much were you paid? Somario asked, his tone almost conversational. 50,000. And how much of that is left? Callum's silence was answer enough. You gambled it away, Somario continued. Within hours of selling out your pregnant sister, you took that blood money and pissed it away at racetracks and card tables. So you didn't even do it for survival. You did it for the high, for the thrill of the bet. I have a problem. I'm sick. I need help. You needed help before you gave our location to people who put a bullet in your sister's shoulder while she was carrying my child. Somario stood slowly, his movements deliberate. You needed help before you gambled with the life of my unborn baby. Now you need something else entirely. What? What do I need? Callum's voice climbed toward hysteria. Consequences. Somario walked to a table against the wall, where Marco had laid out various tools, pliers, knives, a blowtorch. He didn't pick any of them up, just stood there, letting Callum's imagination run wild, letting the fear build until my brother was hyperventilating. Here's what's going to happen, Somario said, turning back. I'm going to ask you every question I need answered. You're going to tell me the truth, the names of everyone you sold information to, every detail you gave them, every conversation you had. And when I'm satisfied that you've told me everything, when I'm sure there are no other threats out there that I don't know about, then I'm going to do what I should have done the moment you asked your sister suspicious questions about her security. What? Callum whispered. What are you going to do? Somario's smile was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. And I wasn't even there. Marco told me about it later, described how it never reached his eyes, how it promised suffering beyond imagination. I'm going to make sure you never threaten my family again, Somario said. I'm going to make you disappear so completely that even your grave won't exist. And I'm going to do it in a way that sends a message to every other person who might think about betraying the Durant family. Callum started screaming then. Started begging and pleading and promising anything. Everything, if Somario would just let him live. He offered information about Somario's enemies, offered to work for him, offered to disappear on his own and never come back. But Somario had stopped listening. He pulled out his phone and made a call, his eyes never leaving Callum's face. It's me, he said when someone answered. Bring the plastic sheeting, the heavy-duty kind, and call the disposal team. We'll be ready in 2 hours. When he hung up, Callum had gone completely silent, his face gray with terror. One more question, Somario said softly, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Did Hesper ever do anything except love you? Protect you? Try to help you? Callum's voice was barely a whisper. No. Then why? Because I was jealous. The words came out broken, defeated. Because you gave her everything, safety, money, love, and I had nothing. Because it wasn't fair that she got out of our shitty family and found happiness while I was drowning. Because I wanted to hurt something, and she was there. The honesty of it hung in the air like poison. Somario nodded slowly, as if Callum had just confirmed something he'd suspected all along. Thank you for telling the truth. It doesn't change what happens next, but at least now I know exactly what kind of man you are. He turned to Marco. Get everything we need. Every name, every contact, every piece of information he sold. Make sure we're not missing anything. Then he walked toward the door, leaving Callum strapped to that chair, knowing with absolute certainty that he'd never leave that warehouse alive. I need to tell you something about Somario that most people don't understand. He's not a sadist. He doesn't enjoy causing pain. Every violent act he's ever committed has been calculated, purposeful, necessary. Violence, for him, is simply a tool no different than negotiation or money or political pressure. But what he did to my brother that night wasn't just about elimination. It was about sending a message that would echo through Chicago's underworld for years. Marco extracted every piece of information first. The names of the men who'd hired Callum, the rival families who'd been paying for intel, the 4 separate occasions Callum had sold us out, including one that had led to an ambush Somario barely survived 3 months ago. By the time they were done, They had a list of 17 people who'd used my brother as a pipeline of information about the Durant family's operations. 17 people who were about to have very bad weeks. Callum was crying by then, snot and tears streaming down his face as he realized the scope of his betrayal. He'd convinced himself it was just about money, just about survival, but he'd compromised security details that kept people alive. He'd given up safe house locations that were supposed to be untraceable. He'd sold information that had gotten 2 of Samario's men killed in that ambush 3 months back. "I didn't know," Callum kept saying. "I didn't know people would die." "You didn't care," Samario corrected. "There's a difference." When the plastic sheeting was spread across the warehouse floor, when the disposal team was ready, when every precaution had been taken to ensure not a trace of evidence would remain, Samario finally picked up the gun from Marco's table. It was a simple 9mm. Nothing fancy, nothing theatrical. Just an efficient tool for an unpleasant job. Callum started hyperventilating when he saw it. Please, I'm begging you. I'm Hesper's brother. I'm family." "You were family," Samario said quietly. "Right up until you gambled with her life and lost." He checked the chamber with practiced ease. "You know what the worst part is? If you'd come to me when you first got in trouble, I would have helped you. I would have paid your debts, gotten you into treatment, set you up with a legitimate job. I would have done all of that because you're her brother, because family matters. Then do it now. I'll change. I'll get help. But you made your choice. You chose to betray her instead of trusting her, and that choice has consequences." Samario raised the gun, and Callum started screaming. Not words anymore, just raw animal terror. He thrashed against the restraints hard enough to tip the chair, but Marco caught it, held it steady. "One last thing," Samario said, his voice cutting through the screaming. "Hesper will never forgive me for this. She might even leave me when she finds out what I did. But you know what? I can live with that. I can live with her hating me. As long as she's alive. As long as our baby is safe. As long as no one ever uses you to hurt her again." He aimed carefully. Not at Callum's head, that would be too quick, too merciful. At his chest. Center mass. Where the pain would last just long enough for understanding to dawn. "This is for putting a bullet in her shoulder while she was pregnant with my child." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Callum jerked backward, blood blooming across his shirt, his eyes going wide with shock and agony. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. Samario lowered the gun, watching dispassionately as my brother's life drained away onto the plastic sheeting. It took longer than you'd think, long enough for Callum's expression to cycle through pain, terror, regret, and finally in those last few seconds something that might have been understanding. When it was over, when Callum's chest finally stopped moving, Samario handed the gun back to Marco and walked away. He stripped off his bloody clothes in a back room, showered in water so hot it left his skin red, and changed into clean garments his men had brought. By the time he left that warehouse, the disposal team was already at work. They'd done this before, knew exactly how to make a body disappear completely. Acid for the bones, incineration for the soft tissue. The ashes would be scattered across 3 different locations, mixed with industrial waste in places that would never be searched. Callum Rowe would simply cease to exist. No body, no grave, no closure for anyone except the people who knew the truth. Samario drove home in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression blank. But when he parked outside the safe house where I was sleeping, he sat in the car for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, letting himself feel whatever it was he'd been holding back. Then he compartmentalized it, locked it away in whatever dark place he kept all the other necessary evils, and went inside to check on his wife and unborn child. When he climbed into bed beside me just before dawn, I stirred but didn't wake. His hand found my stomach, felt our baby's presence, and something in his chest loosened. He'd killed my brother, destroyed the last connection to my original family, committed an act I might never forgive, but we were safe. His baby was safe. And for Samario Vexelio Durant, that was the only thing that mattered. I knew before I opened my eyes. I could feel it in the air, the weight of something final, something irreversible. Samario was sitting in the chair beside my bed, still wearing the clean clothes from whatever he'd changed into after, his hair damp from a shower. But it was his eyes that told me everything. They were exhausted, haunted, and absolutely certain about what he'd done. "He's dead," I whispered. Not a question, a statement. Samario didn't look away, didn't flinch, just nodded once, holding my gaze like he was bracing for whatever came next, my screams, my tears, my hatred. I should have felt something. Grief, Maybe. Horror. Rage at the man I loved for murdering my only brother. But all I felt was this terrible, hollow numbness spreading through my chest like frost. How? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Quickly. He didn't suffer long. A mercy, though I wasn't sure Callum deserved it. He told us everything first. Every person he sold information to. Every time he betrayed us. How many times? 4. Samario leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Including one that got 2 of my men killed 3 months ago. He's been selling us out since last summer, Hesper. This wasn't a desperate mistake. This was a pattern. The numbness cracked, just a little. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me he was dangerous? Because I didn't know it was him. He was careful. Used intermediaries. Covered his tracks. If he hadn't made that phone call yesterday, if he hadn't slipped up and revealed information only the attackers would know. Samario's jaw tightened. I would have found him eventually. But it would have taken weeks, maybe months. And in that time, he would have sold us out again. I closed my eyes, trying to process it. My brother, the person who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me down the aisle at my first wedding, had been systematically trying to get me killed for nearly a year. Not out of necessity, not even out of fear. Out of jealousy and gambling debts and some twisted resentment I'd never even known existed. I need to see the evidence, I said finally. Everything you found. I need to know it's real. Samario pulled out a tablet without hesitation. He'd been expecting this, had prepared for it. It's all here. Text messages, bank transfers, recorded conversations, Marco extracted. I'm not going to tell you that you have to look. But if you need to know, I need to know. He handed me the tablet, then stood and moved to the window, giving me privacy to process what I was about to see. His silhouette against the morning light was rigid, tense, like he was waiting for a verdict that would determine the rest of his life. I started reading. And with each message, each transaction, each piece of damning evidence, something inside me died. There was the first betrayal last July. Callum selling the location of a safe house for $15,000. 2 men had died in the resulting ambush. I remembered Samario coming home that night, covered in blood. Remembered him telling me there'd been an attack, but he'd handled it. I'd never known my brother was responsible. The 2nd September. Security schedules for $25,000. An attempted hit that failed only because Samario changed routes at the last minute. The 3rd November. Guard rotations and weak points in our Chicago penthouse for $30,000. Nothing had come of it then, but the information had been sold, stored, saved for the right moment. And the 4th last week. Our exact location, our security codes, the layout of our bedroom, and the detail that I was 2 months pregnant. $50,000. The biggest payday of all, because I'd handed him the most valuable information possible. My vulnerability. There were text messages too. Callum bragging to his bookie about having a golden goose that would keep paying. Callum laughing about how easy it was to manipulate his stupid sister into trusting him. Callum discussing with his contact whether the pregnancy made me more or less valuable as a target. More valuable. Pregnant women can't run as fast. And Durant will pay anything to keep her alive. I felt bile rise in my throat. Samario was beside me in an instant, taking the tablet, holding my hair back while I vomited into the trash can beside the bed. When I finished, he handed me water and sat back down, his hand resting gently on my knee. He wasn't your brother anymore, Samario said quietly. Maybe he never was. People who love you don't do this, Hesper. They don't trade your life for gambling money. They don't laugh about manipulating you. They don't see your pregnancy as an opportunity to profit. I told him, I whispered, tears finally breaking through the numbness. I told him I was pregnant, and the first thing he thought was how much money he could make selling that information, his own nephew or niece. And all he saw was dollar signs. He was sick, addicted, broken in ways that made him dangerous. Samario's voice was gentle but firm. And I couldn't let him hurt you again. I couldn't risk him selling information that would get you killed. You understand that, right? Why I had to. I understand. The words came out broken, but honest. I hate that I understand. I hate that you were right, but I looked at that evidence. And I know that if you'd let him live, he would have done it again. He would have kept selling us out until one of those attempts succeeded. Samario exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. I thought you'd hate me. I do. I looked up at him. My vision blurred with tears. Part of me hates you so much right now I can barely stand to look at you. Because you took away my last piece of family, my last connection to before. You made that choice without asking me, and now I have to live with it. His face crumpled, pain flashing across his features. Hesper. But the other part of me? I continued, my hand moving to my stomach. The part that's carrying your baby? That part is grateful. Because that evidence shows he was planning to sell us out again. Shows he'd already been contacted by another family willing to pay more. Shows that if you hadn't stopped him, I'd be dead within the week. And our baby. I couldn't finish that sentence. So Mario dropped to his knees beside the bed, his head bowing against my thigh. I felt his shoulders shake, felt the dampness of tears soaking through the blanket. This man, this dangerous, ruthless, powerful man, was breaking apart at my feet because he'd killed to protect me and wasn't sure I could forgive him for it. I ran my fingers through his hair, the gesture automatic, comforting. I don't forgive you yet, I whispered. I don't know if I ever will. But I understand why you did it. And I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing this family, you and me and our baby. Not because of blood, but because of choice. He looked up at me, his eyes red and raw. That's enough. That's more than enough. We sat like that for a long time. Him kneeling beside my bed, me touching his hair, both of us mourning different things. I mourned the brother I'd thought I had. He mourned the innocence he'd stolen from me by forcing me to see the truth. But underneath the grief, underneath the horror and pain, there was something else growing. Something fierce and protective and absolutely certain. My real family wasn't the one I was born into. It was the one I was building, the one I'd fight for, the one that would never, ever betray me for money. Blood doesn't make family, loyalty does. And so Mario had just proven his in the most brutal way possible. The days after Callum's death blurred together like watercolors in rain. I moved through them mechanically, eating when Mario reminded me, sleeping when exhaustion finally dragged me under, existing in this strange limbo between grief and relief. The bullet wound in my shoulder healed slowly, the physical pain nothing compared to the emotional devastation of realizing my own brother had tried to profit from killing me. Mario watched me constantly, hovering like he expected me to shatter at any moment. He'd cleared his schedule completely, refusing to leave the safe house, conducting all his business through phone calls and encrypted messages. His men started making jokes about him going soft. He threatened to shoot the next person who said it, but there was no heat in the threat. All his fire was focused on me, on making sure I was okay, on trying to hold together something he was terrified he'd broken. On the 5th day, I had a doctor's appointment, routine checkup, follow-up on the gunshot wound, assessment of the baby's development. Mario drove me himself, his hand never leaving my knee, his eyes constantly scanning for threats that weren't there. The doctor, a woman in her 50s who'd been delivering babies for mafia families for decades and knew when not to ask questions, examined me with efficient gentleness. She checked my shoulder, declared it healing well. She pressed on my stomach, asked about symptoms, made notes on her chart. Then she pulled out the portable ultrasound machine. "Let's see how the little one is doing," she said, squirting cold gel on my belly. I held my breath as she moved the wand across my skin, searching. The screen showed nothing but gray static for a moment. Then, thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. "There's your baby," the doctor said, pointing to a tiny flicker on the screen. Strong heartbeat, measuring right on track for 10 weeks. Everything looks perfect. That sound, that impossibly fast, impossibly strong heartbeat broke something open inside me. I started crying, but not from sadness this time. From relief, from joy, from the overwhelming realization that despite everything, the attack, the bullet, the betrayal, the murder, this tiny life inside me had survived. Mario's hand found mine, squeezing so tight it hurt. When I looked over, his face was transformed. All the guilt and fear and exhaustion had been replaced by something raw and awed and desperately hopeful. "That's our baby," I whispered. The same words I'd said before, but they meant something different now. "That's everything," he repeated, his voice breaking. "You're everything." We listened to that heartbeat for 5 full minutes. Neither of us wanting to stop. Neither of us ready to return to the complicated reality waiting outside that examination room. In that moment, it was just us and our baby and the future we were choosing to build despite all the blood and betrayal in our past. When we finally left, Mario drove us to Lake Michigan instead of back to the safe house. We sat on the rocks by the water, his arm around my shoulders, watching the waves crash against the shore. It was cold, nearly December, but I didn't care. The chill felt cleansing, like it was washing away the last few days and letting me breathe again. "I can't stop thinking about that heartbeat," I said finally. "Me neither." His hand moved to my stomach, resting there like he could feel it through the layers of clothing and skin. When I heard it, I realized something. "What?" that I'd do it again. Kill your brother. Kill anyone who threatened you or our baby. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over, even knowing it might destroy us. He looked at me, his expression fierce and vulnerable. I'm not sorry he's dead, Hesper. I'm only sorry that it hurt you. I should have been horrified. Should have pulled away from this man who could admit to murder without remorse. But instead, I leaned into him, my head on his shoulder, my hand covering his on my stomach. I know, I whispered. And that's what makes this possible. You're not lying to me. You're not pretending to be something you're not. You're showing me exactly who you are, a man who will burn the world down to keep his family safe. And I'm choosing to accept that, to build a life with that, to raise our child with that, even though I'm a monster. You're my monster. I turned to look at him fully. And I'd rather have a monster who protects me than a saint who gets me killed. He kissed me then, desperate and tender and full of promises that tasted like violence and devotion in equal measure. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I was terrified you'd leave, he admitted, that you'd take our baby and disappear, and I'd spend the rest of my life trying to find you while knowing I'd destroyed the only good thing I'd ever had. I thought about it, I confessed. That first day when I saw the evidence, I thought about running, about going back into witness protection, raising our baby alone somewhere you'd never find us. His body went rigid against mine, but I kept talking. But then I realized something. You didn't kill Callum because you're cruel. You killed him because he was going to get me killed, and our baby. You made an impossible choice to protect us, and even though it hurts, even though part of me will always grieve what could have been, I understand it. I accept it. I choose it. You choose me? His voice was barely a whisper. I choose us. I choose this family. I choose the life we're building, even though it's built on violence and blood and choices I never thought I'd have to make. I placed my hand over his on my stomach. This baby deserves both parents, deserves to grow up knowing their father would do anything to keep them safe. And I deserve a partner who won't hesitate when it matters, who won't let some misplaced sense of mercy put us in danger. So Mario pulled me closer, his whole body shaking with relief. I love you, God Hesper. I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. You and this baby, you're the only things that matter. Everything else is just noise. I love you too. The words came easier than I expected. Even the parts of you that scare me. Maybe especially those parts, because they're the ones that keep us alive. We sat there until the sun started to set, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of blood orange and deep purple. When we finally drove home, something had shifted between us. The grief was still there, the trauma still fresh, but underneath it was something solid and unbreakable. The choice to stay, the choice to build, the choice to become a family not through blood, but through loyalty earned in the darkest possible circumstances. That night, I found Samario in his office, staring at something on his desk. When I got closer, I realized what it was, the ultrasound photos from that afternoon. He'd taken them from my purse when I wasn't looking, had probably been staring at them for hours. I sat beside him without a word. He reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine. I'm going to be a father, he said, wonder in his voice. You're going to be an amazing father, I corrected. Terrifying and overprotective and probably going to scare away every potential date our child brings home, but amazing, he laughed, the sound rusty but real. I never thought I'd get this, a family, something worth protecting that wasn't just territory or money or power. You have it now, I said softly. And we're not going anywhere. He pulled me into his lap, his arms banding around me, his face buried in my neck, and for the first time since my brother's betrayal, I felt safe. Not just physically safe, so Mario had always provided that, but emotionally safe, safe enough to grieve, to heal, to build something new from the ashes of what I'd lost. Blood doesn't make family, choice does. And I was choosing him, choosing us, choosing the future we'd fight for together. 3 weeks after Callum's death, a package arrived at one of Samario's enemies' doorsteps. Inside was a simple gold wedding ring, the one my brother had worn since his short-lived marriage 15 years ago, and a handwritten note on expensive cardstock. Anyone who threatens the Durant family dies screaming. Within 48 hours, every major player in Chicago's underworld had received a similar message. Not the ring that was reserved for the family who'd hired Callum for that final, fatal betrayal. But the warning was clear, delivered through intermediaries and back channels. Samario Vexelio Durant had drawn a line in blood, and crossing it meant complete erasure. No one dared move against us after that. The attempted hits stopped. The surveillance disappeared. Even the whispers in dark corners of the city went quiet. So Mario had sent his message, and it had been received with the appropriate level of terror. I should have felt triumphant, safe, but mostly I just felt tired. "You're thinking about him again," so Mario said from the doorway of our bedroom. We'd finally returned to the penthouse fully renovated after the attack, with security upgraded to levels that bordered on paranoid. I stood at the window overlooking the city, my hand resting on my stomach, which had just started to show a small bump beneath my clothes. "How can you tell? You get this look, distant, sad." He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his hands covering mine over our baby. "You're allowed to grieve him, you know, even after everything he did." "I'm not grieving him," I said slowly, trying to find the right words. "I'm grieving the version of him I thought existed. The brother who loved me, who protected me, who would never hurt me." I leaned back against Somario's chest. "That person never existed. Maybe he did once, when we were kids. But the man who sold me out? That wasn't grief. That was just letting go of an illusion. Do you want to do something? Mark it somehow." I'd been thinking about that for days. Traditional burial was impossible, there was nothing left to bury. A memorial felt dishonest, like honoring someone who'd tried to have me killed. But I needed some kind of closure, some ritual to separate the before from the after. "I want to plant something," I said finally, "in our private garden. Not for who he was, but for who I thought he was. For the loss of that." So Mario kissed the top of my head. "Whatever you need." That afternoon, we stood in the small garden behind our penthouse, a luxury in downtown Chicago, made possible by Somario's money and influence. I held a single white rosebush, still in its pot, while Somario dug a hole in the rich, dark soil. "Why white?" he asked as he worked. "Because it's blank, pure. It represents the innocent version of Callum that only existed in my head." I knelt beside the hole, my movements careful because of my shoulder and the baby. "When this blooms, I'll remember that innocence. But I'll also remember that it was never real. That real family, real loyalty isn't about blood. It's about choice." Together, we planted the rosebush. I patted the soil down around it while Somario watered it, both of us silent, both of us understanding that this wasn't just about Callum. This was about burying my old life completely, about accepting that the family I was born into had failed me, but the family I was building would not. When we finished, I stood and brushed the dirt from my hands. "That's it," I said softly. "That's goodbye." Somario pulled me against him, his hand immediately finding my stomach, a gesture that had become automatic for him. "You okay?" "I am." And surprisingly, I meant it. The grief was still there, the trauma still fresh. But underneath it was something stronger. Certainty. Certainty that I'd made the right choice. Certainty that this man, this dangerous and devoted man, would never betray me the way my brother had. Certainty that our baby would grow up knowing what real loyalty looked like. That night, we lay in bed together, the Chicago skyline glittering through our bulletproof windows. Somario's hand rested on my stomach, waiting patiently for the movement that had started a few days ago, tiny flutters that the doctor said were the baby kicking. "There," I whispered when I felt it. "Did you feel that?" His eyes went wide, his whole body going still with focus. "Was that?" Another flutter, stronger this time. His hand pressed more firmly against my stomach, and I saw tears gather in his eyes, this man who'd killed my brother without hesitation, who controlled an empire built on violence, who'd made people disappear for lesser offenses than looking at me wrong. "That's our baby," he breathed. "That's our baby saying hello. Or telling us they're hungry," I said laughing. "This kid has your appetite. I'm starving constantly." He kissed my stomach, his lips gentle against the small bump. "You hear that, little one? Your mama's hungry. We better feed you both." He looked up at me, his expression so full of love it made my chest ache. "What do you want?" "Anything in the city. I'll get it for you. Those chocolate croissants from that bakery in Lincoln Park. And pickles. And maybe ice cream." "That's disgusting. That's your child's dinner request. Take it up with them." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard since before the attack, and reached for his phone to call one of his men. While he ordered my bizarre pregnancy cravings, I watched him, marveling at how this had become my life. A mafia boss ordering pickles and ice cream at midnight because his pregnant wife craved them. A man capable of brutal violence treating me like I was made of glass. A family built not on blood, but on absolute, unwavering loyalty. "I have something for you," Somario said after he hung up. He reached into the nightstand and pulled out a small box. Not a ring box, we were already married. Something else. I opened it to find a delicate gold necklace with a single pendant, a small circle with 3 tiny diamonds arranged in a triangle. 3 stones, he explained, his voice soft. 1 for you, 1 for me, 1 for our baby. The family we're choosing, the family we're building, the family that nothing, not blood, not betrayal, not violence, can destroy. I couldn't speak, could only hold the necklace and cry while he fastened it around my neck, his fingers gentle on my skin. I know these last few weeks have been hell, he continued. I know I put you through something unforgivable, but I want you to know that every choice I make from here forward is about protecting this. He touched the pendant, resting against my collarbone. This family, this life. You and our baby are my entire world, Hesper. Everything else is just details. I know, I whispered. And that's exactly why I'm staying. Because I finally understand what real family means. It's not the people who share your blood, it's the people who'd bleed for you. He pulled me close, careful of my shoulder, mindful of my stomach, holding me like I was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. And maybe I was. Maybe we were me and this baby, this tiny family we were building, from violence and loyalty and choices that would have horrified the person I used to be. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was someone stronger, someone who understood that safety didn't come from innocence or hope or trusting blood relatives. Safety came from having someone willing to do terrible things to keep you alive. And love, real love, meant accepting them for it. No one will ever hurt you again, Samario promised against my hair. You or our baby. I'll burn this entire city down first. I know, I said. That's why I love you. We fell asleep like that, tangled together, his hand on my stomach, feeling our baby move between us. Outside, Chicago glittered with possibility and danger in equal measure. But inside our fortress of bulletproof glass and armed guards and loyalty earned through blood, we were safe. Not because of money or power or fear, but because we'd chosen each other. Because blood doesn't make family, choice does. And we'd made our choice. Forever. If this story destroyed you emotionally, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. And if you want more Mafia romance stories like this one, hit that subscribe button right now. Your support means everything. What do you want to see next? A rival family's revenge? The baby's birth? Samario's backstory? Tell me in the comments, and I'll make it happen. Stay dangerous, stay loyal, and I'll see you in the next story.